współuczestniczyli w tej zbrodni, która się tu dzisiaj odbędzie. Przyczyną do tego też wydarzenia jest nowy numer magazynu Miasta, który właśnie dzisiaj wyszedł z drukarni. Mamy product placement, mogą go Państwo kupić. Tam z tyłu sprzedajemy go dzisiaj, a także dostali Państwo kupon zniżkowy na prenumeratę. A numer poświęcony jest konfliktom o przestrzeń właśnie, czyli w jaki sposób możemy realizować to nasze marzenie o przestrzeni miejskiej, przyjaznej wszystkim ludziom, niezależnie od ich wieku i sposobu transportu. Dobrze, tyle ode mnie, ale chciałbym jeszcze zaprosić naszych partnerów i współorganizatorów. Zacznę od pana prezydenta Michała Olszewskiego. Panie prezydencie, zapraszam.
Dzień dobry. Nie będę zabierał chleba naszemu gościowi, więc nie będę mówił o tym, dlaczego jest to ważne. Choć jak już Artur powiedziałeś o cytacie z gazety, to ja nie mogę wspomnieć, że gdzieś tam na moim wallu na Facebooku pojawiła się dyskusja z redaktorem Warzechą i ona była mniej więcej w podobnym tonie, z tym, że redaktor Warzecha odnosił się już do postaw ideologicznych, które to, że tak powiem, pchają wszystkich aktywistów i nas jako ratusz w stronę oczywiście jak najbardziej złą. Marksistowsko i tak dalej, i tak dalej. Tam było wiele epitetów pod naszym adresem. Ale jedno zdanie muszę powiedzieć, bo my sobie to trochę powtarzamy jako urzędnicy, że tak naprawdę na naszych oczach dzieje się rewolucja i to jest transformacja miast, która nie jest tylko i wyłącznie polskim przypadkiem, ale przypadkiem wielu zachodnich miast. Z miast, gdzie człowiek był traktowany jako czynnik produkcji, do miast, w których człowiek jest traktowany jako część miasta. To by się wydawało takie oczywiste, aczkolwiek jaka jest historia, nikogo na tej sali nie muszę przekonywać. W sensie, gdzie zboczyliśmy czasami w meandry złego projektowania albo być może nieprzemyślanych projektów. Dzisiaj rzeczywiście jest tak, że dyskutujemy nad warszawską polityką mobilności, bo jest to dokument, który dotyczy nie tylko kwestii dotyczących niskiej emisji. Tak jak Państwo wiecie, mamy przyjęty dokument, realizujemy kilkanaście projektów, które są związane z ograniczeniem emisji, ale tak naprawdę mobilność to nie jest tylko i wyłącznie jakość środowiska, ale tak naprawdę jakość życia. I w tej dyskusji, którą mamy wokół mobilności, niezwykle ważne jest kompleksowe spojrzenie na miasto i na ludzi w mieście, a nie tylko i wyłącznie na to, jakimi środkami transportu mają się w nim poruszać. Bo to, co jest często domeną takich dyskusji, które się toczą wokół miast, to jest spychanie dyskusji na jeden z wątków, w którym miasto żyje. Albo środowiskowy, albo społeczny, albo przestrzenny. Tymczasem tak naprawdę wszystko ma znaczenie i wszystkie działania, które gdzieś tam realizowane są w mieście, czy to przez mieszkańców, czy przez przedsiębiorców, czy przez samo miasto, samorząd miejski, one mają bardzo silny kontekst w tych trzech wymiarach. Ja, żeby nie zabierać, tak jak powiedziałem, głosu, bo sam go trochę straciłem w poprzedni czwartek, w związku z tym oddam już głos, bo zapędziłbym się być może za bardzo w to, co pewnie powie nam gość, a na pewno warto posłuchać i bardzo mnie cieszy, że tak dużo nas się dzisiaj zebrało, bo inspiracje z innych miast, tych, które na pewno będą dzisiaj pokazywane, na pewno może nie są do skopiowania, ale na pewno są ciekawą inspiracją do zmian w mieście. Dziękuję bardzo.
Dziękuję. I jeszcze o 3 minuty wprowadzenia proszę pana Guillerma Wernera, prezesa Aquarius Management, sponsora dzisiejszego wydarzenia.
Dziękuję serdecznie. Witam Państwa. Wprawdzie pierwsze moje ustalenia były z organizatorami, że to będzie do pół godziny do godziny minimalnie, ale skoro mam 3 minuty, to postaram się skrócić moją przemowę. W imieniu Aquarius Management oraz Napollo jest mi niezmiernie miło powitać Państwa, pana Guillermo Peñalosę, pana prezydenta oraz organizatorów i partnerów tego wydarzenia. Panu prezydentowi oraz organizatorom dziękuję serdecznie za zaproszenie do włączenia się w realizację tego przedsięwzięcia. Widząc wszystkich Państwa, cieszę się, że tak wielu mieszkańców Warszawy myśli o przyjaznej i zdrowej przestrzeni miejskiej. O tym, jak taką przestrzeń i lepsze miasta współtworzyć. Napollo jako firma deweloperska stara się wpisać w ten trend, budując nową przestrzeń do życia. W każdym projekcie dbamy o oddech. To miejsca, gdzie mieszkańcy lub użytkownicy mogą odpocząć, zatrzymać się czy wspólnie spędzić czas. ale ta dbałość o oddech to również drobiazgowy wybór lokalizacji, do których łatwo dotrzeć. Środkami komunikacji miejskiej, rowerem czy nawet na piechotę. Poszerzamy wachlarz ciekawych miejsc dla naszych domów, miejsc, w których mieszkańcy żyją w rytmie miasta, zachowują przy tym zdrowie, równowagę oraz spokój. My również chcemy tworzyć dziś z myślą o jutrze i o jutrzejszych pokoleniach. Pod koniec czerwca bieżącego roku nasza grupa zorganizowała serię spotkań z innego oświatowej klasy specjalistów od przestrzeni miejskiej, pana Thomasa Waltza ze Stanów Zjednoczonych. Interesujące jest, jak Thomas Waltz rozumie przestrzeń miejską. Według niego to krajobraz miejski daje świadectwo obecności naszego gatunku na ziemi. Bywa grobowcem naszych ciał, ale jest też skarbcem naszych dziejów i źródłem naszej egzystencji. Charakter każdego miasta jest efektem unikalnie splecionych ze sobą współczynników ekonomicznych i kulturowych, ujawniających coś, co można by nazwać ciągłością od ekologii do kultury. Jestem pewien, że cykl spotkań i warsztatów z panem Peñalosą, międzynarodowym autorytetem przestrzeni pieszej, wspaniale wkomponuje się w nasze rozważania o tym, co wszyscy rozumiemy jako szczęśliwe, zdrowe i demokratyczne przestrzenie miejskie. Bardzo serdecznie zapraszam na pozostałe warsztaty i spotkania z panem Guillermo Peñalosą i mam nadzieję, że w pełni skorzystają państwo z jego wiedzy oraz doświadczenia. Dziękuję serdecznie i mam nadzieję, że wspólnie uda nam się wdrożyć choćby parę rozwiązań, które przedstawi pan Peñalosa. Pani Marto, zdążyłem 3 minuty?
Tak jest.
Super, dziękuję bardzo.
Dziękuję bardzo. No i już, jest ten moment. Pozwólcie państwo tylko, że troszeczkę przedstawię naszego gościa. Często się mówi, że miasto to ludzie. Taki truizm, ale w tym przypadku można powiedzieć, że to jest właśnie człowiek miasto, który w sobie trzyma, zbiera doświadczenia z ponad 200 ośrodków miejskich, z którym miał okazję współpracować. To jest jeden z twórców przemiany Bogoty. Myślę, że każdy z nas co nieco o tym słyszał, a na pewno oglądał film Bogota Change. To także prezes i założyciel organizacji 880 Cities, która jakby upomina się o to, że przestrzeń miejska jest zarówno dla tych, którzy mają 8, jak i 80 lat. To również prezes World Urban Parks, sieci, która promuje zakładanie i tworzenie dobrych parków w mieście. Myślę, że już więcej będziecie mogli państwo dowiedzieć się od samego Guilla Peñalosa. Gil, zapraszam cię.
Thank you. Well, this is amazing with the weather and all, and I see some people were sitting on the floor. Actually, if anybody is sitting, all of this is empty. And there's going to be like 600 images. So I wasn't kidding if someone wants to sit here. Fantastic, exactly. Front row. I was going to talk about cities in general, but then since I arrived, so many people have been talking about it. I said, what, Gil? Are you in Warsaw? Are you going to talk about walking and cycling and parks and streets and other public places? They said, impossible. Too cold. They said, haven't you been here in the winter? And then they said the rain and all of this. You know, the reality is that reminded me. I had a name I want to repeat. I had it at lunch, but I thought it was useful now. Because when I was working in January in the Caribbean, they said, Gil, you cannot walk because it's too hot. Or bike. And I live in Canada, and it was January, and I got on the plane, and I go back to Canada. Too cold. Always, the weather seems to be an excuse. But maybe we gotta learn from the Scandinavians that they say there's no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. You put on the proper clothes and you go on. It might be rainy, it might be sunny. Obviously, this is not proper clothing to bike in the middle of the snow. But proper clothes. People of all ages, all conditions, they enjoy. But of course, it has to be a priority. If it snows, first you plow the sidewalk. walking or people on wheelchairs or so on, and then people continue, and it's nice. And also, I've heard so much about the winter in Warsaw that also I want to open a small parenthesis about winter. Because I know that here in Warsaw, you got about 30 horrible days. 20 actually. But I know that in addition of 20 horrible, you got maybe 60 pretty lousy. But you got over 200 nice days. Unfortunately, one of the problems that sometimes happens in the cities, like Toronto or Warsaw or cities that have winter, is that sometimes we focus too much on the 20 horrible days. And then we mess up the 365. So yeah, if we have winter, maybe we gotta have different facilities and we gotta improve on those. But if we focus on the 200 nice days, then even those 20 horrible days are not gonna be that bad. So sometimes, in nice weather, we're going to be able to bike. You know, this is Warsaw in 5 years. Why not? You know, Warsaw, 10 years ago, 2005, less than 1% were cycling. Now it's at 4. Well, Copenhagen is at 40, so multiply that to 10. But you are moving in the right direction. But look at this, always physically separated. The cars on the left, the pedestrians are separated also. It's not very good because I was biking on my camera and whatever. But it's not only in the summer. All of a sudden you go to the winter and also people bike in the summer, people bike in the winter. People bike in the rain, anytime. So let's focus on the 200 nice days, and then we're going to have a Warsaw that even the 20 horrible days are not going to be that bad. So let me, now that I did that big parenthesis around winter, let me go back to cities. You know, cities is interesting because cities is something that is quite new. 100 years ago, we only had 200 million people living in cities. Today we got about 3.5 billion. And in 34 years, we're going to have about 7 billion. We are going to double the population living in cities. I was talking a little while ago with some students. Imagine the magnificent opportunity for the students today. Before you died, and actually one of the students, I said, why are you here? And she really got me scared because she said, she thought for a while and then she said, I want to see if I can learn something new. I want to see if you can surprise me. So my challenge is to show at least 10 things that are new. But I love it. You know, before the students that are here, before you died, we're going to double the population living in cities. So what a wonderful opportunity for you to build this new world. I mean, not only do we have to improve the cities that we have today, but we got to create great cities for 3.5 billion people around the earth. So not only creating a nice Warsaw or Poznan or Krakow, but also working in Africa, in China, in India, in Canada, in many places. And actually, when people see this number, they think that this is how we're going to live. Obviously not. This is more like how we should live. Civilized, with wonderful places for people walking, wonderful cycling, wonderful public transit, and the three of them, they got to be best friends. So there are places, and it's interesting, and I'm going to show a lot of examples. This used to be cars less than 2 years ago. That's Buenos Aires, and now it's people. And this is in Spain. And like the deputy mayor was saying, it's happening. And there are some successes. It's interesting. You know, the water, we open the tap and we get water. And we say, oh, you know, no big deal getting water. But 25 years ago, we got 4 billion people that had access to drinking water. Today, we got 6 billion, which is good. You know, we went from 4 to 6. However, we still have 1.2 billion people that do not have access to drinking water. And access to sanitation, we still have 2.6 billion. That is 1 out of 3 people around in the earth, 1 out of 3 do not have access to sanitation. That's a huge challenge that all of us have. When we're saying that we got to improve the cities that we have today, this is obviously one of the big problems. But there are other trends. Some are more positive. For example, another trend that is positive is that we're living longer. Much, much longer. And actually the students, one of the things that is great is that today you might be studying urban planning. But maybe 20 years from now you might be studying music. And 40 years from now you might be photography or biology or whatever. We're living so much longer. You know, I call it the new 65. The people that have ever, in the history of humanity, the people that have ever lived to 65, half are alive today. Half. This is totally new. It's so great. Look at this. This is, if we had been born 180 years ago, here's the life expectancy. Each one of these dots are the countries. Just 180 years ago, which is nothing, we didn't have any country. Not Poland, no country in the world had a life expectancy above 45. Today we don't have any with a life expectancy below 45. It's huge. And why is it that it's so interesting what each one of you are doing? Because, you know, here what people were dying of, mostly actually is the sewage and the water, the bad quality of water and sewage and vaccination. But what people are dying of now is about lifestyle-related illnesses, respiratory problems, heart attacks, depression, anxiety. So that's why it's so exciting that we worry about how we're going to live. And people, they're not retiring. They're actually retirement. I think that the biggest waste of resource that we have are the older adults. People retire and we cross them out as if they had died. Except that they got 20, 30, 40 years left. This is a magnificent resource that the city should be using. People that are healthier and wealthier and better educated and more travel. The older adults could be helping students in the schools, could be teaching Tai Chi in the parks, could be helping the city in so many ways. The universities, at least 25-30% of the university courses in the afternoons when the universities are mostly empty should be for courses for older adults. People are eager, people are hungry to learn. They want to learn about music, about history, about philosophy, about gardening. The population of Poland is getting older, as well as the population all over the world. This isn't exclusive to Poland. 1950, the mean population. That means that the population, half of the population had less than 25, half more than 25. Today is 38. And by 2050, it's going to be 50. So we're going to go from 25 to 50. Half of the population is going to be older than 50. So when we are designing our cities, our crosswalks, our parks, our density, and so on, we got to think of that half of the population is going to be older than 50. So we got to make sure that the city is going to be nice for them, for everybody, for the young, for the old, for the athletic, for the non-athletic. The population over 65 is going to double. The over 80 is going to quadruple. Imagine if we had been born in Poland, not today, but 200 years ago, the life expectancy in Poland was 36. So many of us would be dead by now. Now, it's 76. Imagine, more than double in such a short time, the life expectancy. It's clear that we learn how to survive. But when we got all of these issues, climate change and public health crisis and traffic congestion, economic crisis, it's very clear that we must learn how to live. And I think that in many ways all of us are here is so that together, learning from each other, from the person on the right side, on the left, on the back, how to live. So what role are you going to play? What role each one of you individually and as a group? Because all of this is about the built environment. We need to improve the cities that we have today. But we got to create the new cities as well, and we got to create cities for people. That's why I'm so grateful with Marta. Where is Marta? She left. Marta is somewhere. She's fantastic for the opportunity to talk here about street democracy. And her magazine, I hope all of you get it, the Miasta. And for the opportunity to chat. And not only I spoke with those students that want to be surprised, and I hope they are. I also spoke with someone that comes from a small community in Poland of 25,000 people. Everything that I tell you today is just as applicable to a community of 10,000 or 500,000 or 1 million or 2 million. I wish I had known more people were coming from small communities to have had more examples, but everything is. Because the people are living longer in the community of 25,000 and the community are living longer in the communities of 2 million. The problems of obesity are in the small one and in the big one. The issues of happiness. We're going to talk about happiness. I know happiness is a concept that is very hard to define, almost impossible to measure. But that's how most important things in life are. Love, affection, friendship. So, but it's just as applicable. So I'm really happy that we have people from small communities and large, and I'll try to make emphasis. I'm going to be talking about how to create a vibrant city and healthy community with happier people. I'm going to make emphasis on equity and public health. To put things into context, first I'm going to talk about Bogota and 880 cities, and then I have 8 messages for Warsaw and street democracy. Why Bogota? Obviously, it's not the ideal city, obviously. But in my previous life, I was commissioner in Bogota, and I learned many things. Two things that I learned is, one is not about the money. Many times you go to the government and say, oh, we don't have the money. We want a park, we don't have the money. We want a bike, we don't have the money. And then you go out and you see they are doing elevated highways and all of this. It's not second, that I've been doing. Now I advise many cities, but before I was doing. For example, we built in 6 years, 2 administrations, over 800 parks. We built parks all over the city. This was one of them. The Pope came here, gave a mass for 1 million people, and then the Pope left, and nothing happened. Nothing happened in 27 years. There were no sidewalks, there were nothing. Then they planted a few trees, but practically nothing happened in 27 years. Why nothing happened? Because change is hard. Change is hard in Warsaw, in Poznan, in Krakow, in Copenhagen, in Paris, in Bogota. Everywhere change is hard because it's a lot easier to do more of the same. Maybe a little bit better, but more of the same. Because sometimes you try to change and the cave people show up. Who are the cave? They are the citizens against virtually everything. They oppose everything. Sometimes I call them civic cadavers. What is civic cadavers? People that you thought they were dead because they haven't done anything good for the community, but you try to do, and they resuscitate. Not to support, to oppose. But I also learned that the citizens, they pay us every other week, is to get things done. Not to have 20 excuses why things cannot be done. So each one of us has to become a champion at finding solutions to the problem. Not at finding problems to the solution. So for 27 years, nothing happened. And then in 4 years, we turned it into the nicest park for recreation, for sport, for cultural activities, things that people could do at their own time and at their own pace, or they could do in groups. Lots of uses and activities. By the way, that is what makes parks great, the uses and the activities. I find many cities that it's easier to find the millions to do the park than the thousands to make it work. And whether you are from a city of 25,000 or 2 million or 10 million, it's very important to have money for the uses, for the activities, not just to build the park. The success of parks in a big park is the management. It's how to get uses. It's how to develop partnerships with the schools, with the religious groups, with the seniors groups. How to create activities in the daytime, at nighttime, in the summer, in the winter. But it's not just about these big parks. We're going to have small parks. People were asking me, in Warsaw, should we have small parks or big parks? Well, unfortunately, you need to have both, small and large, because they satisfy very different needs. The small neighborhood park, that's where we develop a sense of belonging, that we develop community. That's where we meet the parents of our children's friends. But we're not going to be able to play football in the small community park. That's why we also need the big ones, and we're not going to be able to go canoeing, so we need the citywide. So at the end of the day, what we need is a citywide park system, with small, with medium, with large. with active recreation and passive recreation and contemplative recreation. And another day we can, Marta, whatever, you can invite me to talk about parks longer, because now we're going to take more on sustainable mobility. But parks is very, very important to have that. Parks is critical to the happiness of any society. And more at home, we, especially when we are living in smaller places, and we sleep there, but we live is outside. And part of what we're going to be talking today is about sidewalks, and sidewalks are part of the family of the parks, and I'll talk about that. But before I finish with Bogota, I want to tell you about Ciclovia. What is Ciclovia? It's the world's largest pop-up park. When I became commissioner, it was a very small program with a few thousand people, and in less than 3 years, we turned it into the world's largest pop-up park. What do? Sunday, we pop it up, and people come out and walk and bike and skate and run. Here is all the different colors of the different income levels. So we made sure that all the wealthiest and the poorest and everybody would be connected. We also made sure that all of the major parks were connected so that people can use it, can connect, they can go. How do we do it? Simple. We open streets to people and close them to cars. And magic happens. You know, since you are a little kid, people have been telling you, watch out, a car is coming, and you are frightened. Now you got the streets for you to walk, to bike. And see, not everybody wants to walk or bike or skate, so along the road we do places where people can do aerobics, or Tai Chi, or Cha-Cha-Cha, or yoga. And it's great, all about physical activity. And it's something that has worked. By the way, we have done this in cities of 10,000 people, 100,000, 1 million, 20 million like Mexico City. And it works the same everywhere. Who goes? Everybody. All you need is 2 feet and a heartbeat, and you have fun. People of all ages and conditions, the young, the old, the rich, the poor, the fat, the skinny. Over 1.5 million people go out every Sunday of the year. Every Sunday and holiday. This is great because it changes minds. The deputy mayor was talking about changing minds, changing thinking. This changes minds. All of a sudden we realize that the streets are public spaces that belong to all. Rich or poor, young or old. It's not about moving cars. We've had streets for thousands of years. We've had cars for only about 80. Unfortunately, in the last 80, we have been building the cities thinking more on car mobility than on people's happiness. This has become like a positive virus. It's spreading all over the place. Who would have thought that the city of angels, also the city of cars, now they got their own Ciclovia, and Portland, and San Francisco. By the way, these three are small cities of less than 20,000 each. So this works everywhere. New York. Not just any street, the most iconic where people want to go, Park Avenue, 8 lanes in each way. This is San Jose, California, where they have Google and Apple and all of them are there. 55,000 cars on a Friday, people walking and cycling on a Sunday. Paris, along the River Seine. Magnificent, all year, even in the middle of the winter. Initially, you can start in Warsaw, maybe May to September. Maybe next year, do it monthly, May to September, connect the city. What is the risk? Nothing. You're not building gymnasiums, you're not building anything, no capital investment. You do it May to September next year, monthly. If it doesn't work, then you don't do it again. But if it works, then you do it weekly the following year. This is great also because it's about social integration. All of a sudden, the thing that I loved about Bogota is that this is the only place where we meet as equals, everybody. I actually think it's the only place in the whole city that we meet each other as equals. The rich and the poor don't live in the same buildings. They don't go to the same restaurants. Their children don't go to the same schools. But here, people meet each other as equals. It might be the wealthiest person. And actually, that equity is so important. Some people were asking me about Ciclovia and about parks. Why so much emphasis when the poor people have so many needs? I said, well, if you really are worried about the poor people, when the poor people feel miserable, it's in the leisure time. When people are working, the wealthiest person the president, owner of a company, or the minimum wage worker cleaning floors, they have similar experience. But in the leisure time, the owner of the company has theaters and movies and restaurants and travels and so on. The minimum wage worker doesn't. So when we improve the use of the leisure time, we're really improving quality of life. And I love parks, but most people that go to a park are very homogeneous, are the people that live around the park. But when you go to the open streets with 121 kilometers, you are connecting everybody, rich and poor. We also did over 280 kilometers of protected bikeways. And Bogota went from around 28,000 to over 500,000 people cycling. When my brother was mayor the first time, he led this process. It was interesting because there was not 1 centimeter of bikeway from Alaska to Argentina. So it was very gutsy to do it at that time. Now it's a lot easier because it's fashionable. You know, Paris is doing it, and New York is doing it, and Warsaw is doing it, and everybody's doing it, which is great. But it's about creating connections. Some of these places were so poor that here in beautiful Warsaw it's almost impossible for you to imagine the level of poverty that on some of these neighborhoods. But why do you need to do really good sidewalks, really good bikeways? Part of it is because it's going to be safer. But part of it is about dignity. We need to dignify the people walking. We need to dignify the people cycling. And by the way, as you can see, there was not enough money for walking, cycling, and cars. So it was to either walking or cycling or cars. And it was decided that the cars would be done by a future administration. So when I say it's not about the money, of course it's not about the money, but it's about priorities. And it's quite interesting, some of the things. It's all about being consistent between what you think, what you talk, and what you do. We need to hold the politicians accountable to that. We need to participate in politics and get the best people possible. Now, I run 2 NGOs. One is called 880 Cities and one World Urban Parks, and I've had the privilege to work in over 200 different cities around the world. World Urban Parks is about a world where people value and have easy access to quality urban parks. I hope that you go to the website. Some of you might join the city or individuals. It's worldurbanparks.org. And 880 Cities. You know, everywhere I go, people ask me, Gil, what is 880 Cities? Well, 880 Cities is not about walking or cycling. It's not about streets or parks. Those are the means, not the end. The end is, how can we create successful cities? That is the idea, how to create successful cities. A few days ago, Friday or Saturday, I was here. Oh my God. I saw this woman, the DJ Wicca. And I saw hundreds of people dancing here. It was absolutely magnificent. And then I went outside of the downtown and I saw people playing. And I went running through the parks and I found secondary students or university and in some other places. You know, the parks are so important. One of the most important days of the life of this couple, where do they want to spend it? In the middle of a park. You got so many great places. So that's what 880 is about helping have vibrant cities and healthy communities where people are going to live happier. That's the idea, where people are going to live happier. And always, everywhere I go, people ask me, is this intersection safe? Can I send my children walking to school? Can my grandparents walk or bike to the park or to public transit? Can they walk to public transit? I said, look, you don't need to be a transportation engineer. 3 simple steps. Step number 1. We call it the 880 rule of thumb. Unfortunately, common sense is the least common of the senses. But 3 steps. Step number 1, think of an 8-year-old that you love. Can be your son, your daughter, your brother, sister, grandchildren. Once you have that 8-year-old, look how wonderful, in mind, then step number 2, think of an 80-year-old that you love. Your parents, your grandparents, uncles, cousins. And then once you have that boy or that girl in mind and you have the 8 and you have the 80, Then go to the step number 3. Would you send them across that intersection? Would you send them walking to the park? Would you send them on a bike to get public transit? Would they feel safe? If you would, it's because it's safe enough. If you would not, it's because it's not. And we need to do it better. What if everything that we did in Warsaw, everything, the sidewalk, the crosswalk, the school, the hospital, the park, the community center, the plaza, had to be great for an 8 and an 80. It's not 8 to 80. It's an 8 and an 80 as an indicator species. Because if it's good for the 8 and it's good for the 80, then it's going to be good for everybody, from 0 to over 100. We need to stop building our city as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic, and build great cities for all. That is the concept of 880, building great cities for all. But we got to move fast. There's a sense of urgency. Well, we saw that in the population. We're living longer, much longer. We saw how Poland has doubled the life expectancy from 36 to 76. We also saw how all the cities in Poland, there's a lot of people from the rural areas continue moving. But we can learn from Einstein, who said we cannot solve the problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. So I want to go through 8 messages on street democracy. 1. Change is hard. Change is hard. Sometimes you talk about things and people say, oh, but change is hard. Of course. It's a lot easier to do more of the same. But when we got so much issues, climate change, public health crisis, we cannot just do more of the same. My friend Yangel, he said that, Copenhagen also, the cars were taking over in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. And then the energy crisis came on and they changed. When they wanted to create the first pedestrian street, people say, what, pedestrian street, a street to walk? They said, no, we don't want a pedestrian street. We have too many cars. And then they said the weather is horrible. It's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer, it rains all year round. But the number one reason why they didn't want a pedestrian street, they said, oh, that's not part of our culture. Walking, that's for the Italians, because the Italians are loud and noisy. But we are Danish and we are cold and quiet and we don't go out. Let me tell you, the Danish now are more Italian than the Italians. They love the pedestrian streets, in the rain, in the sun. This is City Hall in Copenhagen. They went from 18 parking lots like this to people places like this. Even in the middle of the winter, the pedestrian streets are vibrant and exciting, and now they walk and they bike, and you see people of all ages, and it's exciting. But when you are going to try to change, I want to give you 3 advices. First, change is not unanimous. Change. Sometimes people say, oh, we're going to change, but there is some concern. There are some people that are not on board. It will never. Change never happens by consensus. If you want change by consensus, you have to water down change so much that change is not going to happen. Even Times Square in New York, even today, like 7 years after Times Square became pedestrian, even today, more than 25% of the people are against it. So change is not general. Second, the general interest must prevail over the particular interest. So when you go to any public meeting, all of the discussion has to be about the general interest. What is the general interest? So if you say, we're going to widen the sidewalk, and people say, oh, but my store, no, don't tell me about your store. Tell me why the general interest is that you should widen, or the general interest that you should not widen. But it has to be, it's about the general interest must prevail over the particular. And number 3, when you say no to something, you also say yes to something else. So if you say, we don't want to promote cycling, that's fine. Might be your decision. But when you say no to cycling, you are saying yes to more cars, you are saying yes to more obesity, you are saying yes to more polluted air, or whatever. Or in any case, or in any topic, if you say no to something, you are saying yes. Let me give you another example about change, because Copenhagen, we think, oh, they bike and they don't need special clothing and in the rain. They are at 41%. But something that you need in Warsaw is to be bold, to be ambitious. Don't be complacent. I mean, in Warsaw, if you want to compare yourself, if you want a list of cities that are worse than you, in 5 minutes you can do a list of 1,000 cities that are worse. But if you compare yourself with cities that are worse, eventually you're going to look like those. But instead, if you take a look, okay, here's Warsaw. What cities have the similar size and weather and income level? Okay, of those, which is the best in mobility, which is the best in walking, which is the best in cycling, in public transit, which is the best in climate change resilience, which is the best in parks, which is the best in public health, which is the best in everything. And then compare yourself with those, and eventually you're going to look like those. And continue improving all the time. Copenhagen is at 41, now they want to go to 50%. And they don't need special shoes to bike. They had these old public bikes that last year were changed for this ones that had a GPS and all kinds of technology, and they continue to improve and widen their bikeways and build new ones and dedicate green waves so that when you are on a bike, all the traffic lights are at the speed of the bicycle, not at the speed of the cars, and building new bridges and putting counters and creating the connection with transit. But of course, it's much more than that. Because sometimes people say, oh, those cities were built that way. They were not built. Here, 10 years ago, here there were 6 lanes of cars. Now they took away the 4 lanes in the middle and built a linear park. It's gutsy. That's why I say be bold in Warsaw and every city in Poland. Look at this, not 1 or 2, kilometers long linear park. Imagine the quality of life of the thousands of people that live there. And something they did nice is they hire a different architect for every 200 meters. So here you got one style, you go to the next one, it's a different style. Every 200 meters, a different style. Having a link of the schools with the parks, so you bring all the kids to the parks for Fiesta, and also you build these parks, beautiful, next to all of the schools, so then they can be used for the community and they can be used for the schools, and there's a wonderful link, and have flexibility. Here there used to be 3 lanes of cars, now it's people places. Here you walk in the summer, but winter comes and then you go skating. You gotta make public places really nice, as exciting in the winter. If you don't have skating, it's nice. But what if in addition to skating, you got lights? And in addition of lights, you got music. And also, you got hot chocolate. And all of that, you get a great place to go. But in the winter, you got to keep improving the places. So good cities don't become complacent. Barcelona is a very, very good walkable city. Have a fantastic density, not with 40-story buildings, but 4 or 5-story buildings next to each other. Last month, Barcelona said we're going to improve our walkability. Not 5%, not 10%, 60%. 60. What are they doing? You see, they got all of this grid. So they said, okay, well, you're going to have cars in one, and then 2 of them are going to be for pedestrian, and then cars again, and so on. So 60% is going to improve the walkability in Barcelona, a city that is already good walking. So I know that change is hard, but change is doable. I know that many of you already saying on the back of your mind, because you have told me through the media and so on, say, oh, Gil, in Warsaw we are different. In Warsaw we got nothing in common with Copenhagen or New York or Bogota. In Warsaw we are unique. I know. Always remember that you are absolutely unique, just like everyone else. You know, everyone is unique. Even within Warsaw, each neighborhood is unique. Each city is unique. Each street is unique. You are different than Poznan. You are different than Krakow. You are different than Copenhagen. Everyone is unique. But we need to open our mind. This is not like on the computers that we copy and paste, but rather how to adapt and improve. Every single idea that I'm presenting is adaptable. If you open your mind, that is not about copying and pasting, but it's about improving. It's about improving. The other day, for the person that was telling me about the community of 25,000, the other day, have you heard of Shania Twain? Shania Twain, the singer. She comes from a small community of 40,000 people, Timmins, Ontario. And the mayor of Timmins called me. And she said, Gil, you got to come and see this park. And I said, I'll go, but why? She said, because 2 years ago you came by and you spoke about the pilot projects of New York. And I said, oh, she got it. I was talking about pilot projects on the streets of New York. But she didn't say, oh, I'm from Timmins, 40,000, I got nothing to do with New York, 8 million. No. Instead of closed-minded, she opened her mind. And she said, what can I learn? So she picked up the idea of pilot project. and she did a pilot park in a community of 40,000. And then it was so successful, the next year became even bigger. So let's not be complacent. Let's not be complacent. One of the things that I've seen here great is the plan of the centers. Your centers all over Warsaw. That is what a great idea. And it has the Association of Architects is leading behind it. And they're going to do 10 pilots. And it needs all of your support to get behind these 10 pilots to do it really, really nice. I went with the person leading and the community working in Praga. One of the 10 pilots. Look at this. They got a wonderful park here, but it's horrible. It's being suffocated by cars. Terrible. Look at this. This is sidewalk, not side park. There is nothing as horrible taking place in Warsaw now as the fact. So actually when we were walking, someone told me, I don't know, the anecdote. I said, when did you start letting your cars on the sidewalks? And they said, well, actually, in 1981, during the martial law, they said, since the tanks were going to be on the street, they told the citizens, get your cars on the sidewalk. And then 2 years later, it went away, and the cars stayed on the sidewalk. So that's not really a good memory. We got to get rid of all of those cars out of the sidewalk, all of them. But look at this project that the Association of Architects is leading. This is fantastic. I hope you Google it and get a copy of that, because these are some of the studies. We were walking through this. Look at this. You're going to see the children playing. This is the kind of environment. And it's not because you don't know how to do it. You know how to do it much better. Look at this. Horrible. Imagine that these horrible streets with all of these cars here in Praga were like this. It's totally doable. That all of a sudden, instead of having this view from the kids, you will have this view. People walking, having an ice cream. Of course, you got to put some bollards, because some of these car owners, they think that the city belongs to them. By the way, all the car owners are also walkers. Every single trip in a car begins and ends by walking. You might own 5 cars. If you have a child under 18, that child, the only way to move is to walk or to bike. So those car owners also need to have a nice place. Imagine these kind of sidewalks in Praga. So instead of having this totally invaded by cars, like that. I mean, it's totally doable. It's totally doable. But let me go to the next point, because otherwise we're not going to have time for questions. We're going to talk about equity. And when I talk about equity, I'm not talking about equality. Some people are starting, this cartoon really defines well equity and equality. Some people are starting so far behind that it's not just about giving a box to each one. Maybe someone needs to have 2 or 3 boxes while others don't need any. When we look at any city, when we evaluate any city, we need to evaluate cities by how well we treat the most vulnerable people. Who are the most vulnerable citizens? The children, the older adults, the poor. And actually, that's one of the ideas in these 10 pilot projects of city centers around. That's one of the things they're thinking about, how to treat those. Because in many places, we're not doing a good job. A few weeks ago, I was working in a city in the U.S., and I was telling them in the U.S., 1 out of 5 children live in poverty. You go to places like Fresno. In one part of the city, you have only 1 acre per 100,000 people. In another part, you got 5 times as much. This issue of geographical equity, we got to have a Warsaw that is good for everybody. Look at this, Cleveland. I was working in Cleveland, and I was visiting this neighborhood. If you are born in this part of the city, your life expectancy is 64. If you are born in this part, your life expectancy is 90. And I was telling them, I don't know what is worst, that this happens, that if you are born in one part of the city or other, your life expectancy might be 20, 25, 30 years more or less than other parts, or that they think it's normal. They think, and it's not because it's Cleveland. You go to Washington and it's the same. You go to New Orleans and it's the same. And then they say, oh yeah, here the life expectancy is 55. It's because those people are lazy. It's because they don't want to work. And then you wonder why Mr. Donald Trump has 30 or 40% of the people. You know, this is really crazy to accept that that's normal. That is not normal. You go to this neighborhood and you walk the neighborhood, you don't see one grocery store. So even if you wanted to buy fruits and vegetables, there are none. Instead here, there are 4 times as many convenience stores than here. The parks are in horrible condition or non-existent. Their crosswalks dangerous, their sidewalks full of cracks. Their parks don't have any lights, so at night is a fertile ground for gangs and drugs. So, well, you got to work on that. It's nice. This is the OECD countries, the level of inequality. Poland is more or less in the better half with some of this, but of course you got to be careful not to move in this direction. Also, we got to worry about mobility equity. You know, the people here in Warsaw that have a car, if you have a car, you're spending 25% of your income on mobility. 25. I'm happy to see so many young people because the young people are becoming smarter all over the world. You know, in Canada and the US, in the last 4 years, the young people 16 through 24 purchased fewer cars than in the last 40 years. Got fewer driver's license than in the last 40 years. For them, a car is not a status symbol. For them, it's much more a status symbol than an iPad. It's more a status symbol to pay a higher rent but live in a walkable neighborhood. It's more of a status symbol to get a backpack and go to India than to have a car. They don't need a car. They need public transit. They need walking. If they need a car for 2 hours 1 month or 3 hours, they rent one for 3 hours. But they don't need a car 24 hours, 7 days a week, where they're going to be spending 25. No wonder people that have cars don't have money for vacations or retirement or even to go to dinner with their families. If instead of having a car, people use public transit in Warsaw, they will be spending only 5%. It would be as winning the lottery. Instead of 25, you win 5. But except that the lottery is not 1 in 10 million. No, it's 1 in 1. It's a personal decision. So there is nothing that the government can do that can help more the economic situation of a family than facilitating the possibility to downsize from 2 cars to 1 or from 1 to 0. And it's going to be great for the local economy because also now if you got all of that money, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the restaurants. You're going to go to the bars. You're going to improve your garden, your house, and the money is going to stay in the local economy instead of going to pay for cars built in China. So if the people that have cars don't care about the environment, don't care about the health, don't care about anything, usually they care about their pocket. 25%. 3, sidewalks, bikeways, parks, are they important? They're important, but it's not so obvious. I go to many municipalities and I show them these playgrounds and these sidewalks, and what do they tell me? They say, oh, Gil, go do some fundraising. But when I show them a pothole, they go crazy about the potholes. Maybe they think that a car is going to fall there. And the media plays into this. This TV station hired a woman, all she does goes and measures a pothole and has a section on the TV on Tuesdays and Fridays. And the citizens, they get organized to pressure the government about the potholes, not about the playground, not about the sidewalk, about the pothole. And finally, when they take care of it, elected officials and staff and media, they go and celebrate. Pothole. So I said, why is a small pothole so important? Maybe it's because one thing is that the people that have cars, if they are paying 25% of their income on mobility, also because from the air, the streets are the biggest public space that we have. The streets in Warsaw are between 20 and 40% of the city. And if we take out whatever is private, the homes and so on, the streets are between 70 and 90% of the public space, the space that belongs to all of us, public, young and old, rich or poor. So what is the smart way to use that public space? It's very clear that if we walk, that if we bike, that if we take public transit, we're going to use a lot less space. We got to think, this is very, very important because this is about Warsaw's survival, competitiveness. Look, here there used to be a river going through here. I mean, let me tell you, we live in an ever more globalized economy. And in a globalized economy, in a globalized world, the best people, they can live anywhere they want to. However you define best, it can be the best engineers, the best medical doctors, the best coffee makers, or musicians. If I'm a really good carpenter, I can live anywhere I want. So where am I going to live? Wherever me and my spouse and my children have the best quality of life. So every morning, the leaders of Warsaw must wake up thinking, how can we attract the best people? How can we retain our best people? It's not an issue of quantity. I'm talking about quality. How can I retain the best pizza makers? How can I retain the best medical doctors, the best carpenters? So quality of life has become the most important tool of economic competitiveness. So here, let me give you an example, of a concrete example. There used to be a river going through here, but 40 years ago, it was cars, efficiency. So they built a road on top of the river. But 7 or 8 years ago, someone said, can we go to Warsaw and get the best people to come and live here? Probably not. So someone said, wasn't there a river going under? And they brought it out. And would you like to live here or here? Same street. This is how it looks now. We need to decide if we want our cities to build streets for cars or streets for people, because we can do one or we can do the other. Do we want our streets to look like car storage or actually help build community? All of this is about how do we want to live. We dream that this is how we want to live, and then we go out and build this. We are not consistent. Here in Poland, you can spend all of the money for investment in the next 20 years, and you will never build as many highways as Houston or Los Angeles. However, the traffic in Houston and Los Angeles each year is worse and worse and worse. And the speed of the cars moving is worse. So why are you moving in that direction? This is Florence, Italy, all of it, and one intersection in Atlanta, the same scale. So let's open our minds about public spaces. Public spaces are so important. And the streets are public space, and the sidewalks are public space. And the revitalization of Detroit is going also through a lot of public spaces. Or great places here in Malmo, skateboard parks, and so on. I love this skateboard park, not only because it has a nice tree, but because it has a nice cozy area for the parents and the grandparents. Every time that you build a playground for children, make sure that you put a nice cozy place for the parents or the grandparents. But otherwise, they bring the children, and 5 minutes later, they are bored. But if they got a nice place to socialize and have a coffee and read the paper, and think of big parks like Piedmont or the Elevator in New York or the Bean. But keep in mind, public spaces are not just parks or are not just for sports. I was watching the World Cup. Where did I go to see the World Cup? I was working in Chicago, so I went to the park. And actually, that's what they were doing in Seoul and in Bogota and in Germany. People were using public spaces. But it's not just for ports. They had the umbrella revolution in Hong Kong. Where do they go? They go to the parks and the public spaces. It's because in the public spaces where it's equal. It's a wonderful equalizer. Here no one cares who's rich, who's poor. This is Occupy Wall Street, and this is Jesuit Charlie in Paris. Young and old and rich and poor. This is 2 million people in Rio. But it's not during the World Cup or during the Olympics. It's 3 months before the World Cup. What were they doing? They were having a mass with the Pope. The Pope came. Imagine, I just heard that to be a saint, you need to have a miracle. Well, this Pope is going to be a saint because this is a miracle. It's 2 million people from Brazil who love a person from Argentina. They hate each other, but it's not just about big parks. Look at this. You change a stair, and all of a sudden, it can transform. Imagine from the citizen engagement. Imagine if all of a sudden, in some of these 10 pilot projects of the city centers, you have a stair, and you get either a retail, a small shop, or a family painting one step and putting the initials. And then you get 130 stores or families. The sense of belonging that they're going to develop is great. A few months ago, I was in Poznan, and I was taking a look at how they use some of these public places. And it's really great, all across Poland. It's part of the environment. But we cannot allow the public space to totally be invaded by cars And we really got to work on those uses and those activities. And it's something that was quite exciting for everybody. 4, play. Let's play in Warsaw. Let's have a playable city in Warsaw. What a wonderful idea. Imagine you go to take public transit and you can have a swing in the meantime. Or you go with your kid and you can have a small parquet. Maybe you are going to be able to train for the Olympics while you wait or you throw the garbage. So playability is something that is very important. Play is critical. It should be one of the most important things we do in Warsaw. For children, playing is not just fun and games. Playing is learning. That's where the children develop their muscle strength. That's where they develop the cognitive thinking, the capacity to learn languages, to concentrate, to coordinate. They develop the sense of belonging. They develop friendship. What if in Warsaw and every city in the world we had a goal that every child had a park or a play area within 500 meters? Everyone. Everyone. A park or a play area within 500 meters. It's totally doable. By 2020, in the next 4 years, let's start building parks everywhere, whatever we don't have. And some of you might say, what if we don't have parks in a neighborhood? Let's think what belongs to all of us. The street, the sidewalk, the school, the library, the city hall, whatever. Everything that belongs to us. In New York, they did the study, and they found that there were many, many neighborhoods that did not have a park within a walking distance. So they went to the schools, and they said, schools, this is your quote-unquote playground. What a horrible place. This is just pavement with 2 basketball courts. And they said, we'll fix your school if and only if you open it to the community after 4 p.m. and Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. Not 1, not 2, 221 schools. New York increased by 31% their playgrounds just by changing schools from that into this. And why is all of this green so important? Because when you play in green settings, it reduces severity of attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. Yesterday I went running and I went past 4 schools. It might be a coincidence or not, but the 4 schools had a big fence and all of them were closed. It's very important to see how to develop, how to get those schools to change from this into this, where you have a garden area, and then the children know that the tomatoes don't come out of a factory, but you are growing them, and you got the trees. And this park takes in more than 55,000 gallons of water a year. And if you don't have a school or a library or something, take over a street, close a street in a neighborhood, 1 block, and make it a play area, and allow only the cars that live in that block to go in and out. Everybody else has to walk. So we got to work on that playability. 5, walking. Pedestrians have to be first. Pedestrians. Who came walking today? Raise your hand if you walk. You know, only a few raised their hands. Everybody came walking. Everybody came walking. Every single trip begins and ends. I don't see any cars here. I don't see any buses. I don't see any bicycles. Every trip begins and ends by walking. We are all pedestrian. We walk to the car. We walk to public transit. We walk to the bicycle. We walk to places. And one of the things we love is that that's how we were created. You know, just like the birds, they fly, or the fish swims. The deer runs. And people, we walk. And one of the things I love is that when we walk, we use all our senses. We're walking, and we see the children playing. We hear the birds singing. We go in front of a coffee shop, and we smell the aroma of the coffee. That's, I guess, one of the things that makes us so happy. You have all of the senses. We walk in the summer. We walk in the winter. We walk everywhere. But we got to make it safe. Safe. Yesterday, people driving motor vehicles. Yesterday, people driving motor vehicles killed 741 people walking. That's not civilized. That's more than 1 person every 2 minutes, every less than 2 minutes. They are not accidents. They are incidents. They could have been avoided. So we got to work on things like Vision Zero that have in Sweden. Many cities are adopting the Vision Zero, and all the cities in Poland should be adopting it. No people should die walking, cycling, in transit, or in cars. If we want to improve walking, the pedestrians have to be the priority. But we have been building cities for thousands of years. But now we've been building cities thinking only of the car. So this is how we do the streets, the sidewalks. We allow the cars to go on the sidewalk. We're telling these people, you are a second-class citizen. Every morning we're telling you are a second-class citizen. We have money to do 6 lanes for cars. We don't even have money to do a sidewalk. If we're going to improve walkability, we got to lower the speed. Everywhere in Poland, the speed limit should be 30 kilometers or less. Why? Because if you get hit by a car at 30, there is only 5% probability of being killed. If you get hit by a car at 50, it's going to be over 85. Also because many more people walk. When you're walking and the cars are going by at 25 or 30, it's an enjoyable walk. You stop, you talk to the neighbors, you socialize. When the cars are going by at 50 or 60, you don't. So the big streets, the arterials, you're going to have 50, 60 cents. But as soon as you leave a big street, you go into a residential street, all of them should be 30 kilometers an hour. If you create a small island in the middle, you eliminate more than half of the incidents. Why are we still doing streets without the small island? The kids, they go out on a school trip. Not all of them cross at the same time. They stop, they wait. The older adults, twice as many older adults are hit in those intersections than the proportion of the population. So we got to have a two-word law, pedestrians first. And I know that it's hard. That's why all of you have to be activists. Yesterday, I was in a TV program in the morning. She was very fantastic pedestrian advocate. She lives downtown. She has a car, but she says, I walk everywhere. I take public transit everywhere. I use my car to go from one city to another. I use my car if I'm going to go at night, but during the daytime, I walk everywhere. And she said, we got to improve the walkability. One of the things she was complaining is, as you can see, she has some high heels. So she said, some of the sidewalks, they look nice from the air, but they got these squares, and it's very hard on the heels. But she was totally supportive. Instead, him, before we even went on the air, he said, I hate pedestrians. I said, well, then you hate yourself because everybody's pedestrian. You are pedestrian, your children are pedestrian, your parents are pedestrians. But then we need all of you. We need tons of activists because clearly you got a problem in Warsaw. When this beautiful plaza should be a magnificent plaza for people. When we are allowing the cars to eat up, it's obvious that the sidewalk used to go up to here. Why are we allowing the cars to encroach into every place? We sometimes even got up over these spikes. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Where are the people walking? Where are they going to go? And some people say, oh, so what am I going to, the guy in the news said, what am I going to do with my car? I said, that's not my problem. It's your problem. It's like if you say, what am I going to do with my jacket? Whatever you want to do with your jacket, it's not my problem. Why is the government going to assume what to do with the cars? The cars are built by a private company, are sold by a private company, are purchased by a private person. Why are they going to go and tell the government? It's like if you buy a fridge, and then you go to the government and say, oh, Mr. Government, or Mrs., because now here you got Lady Mayor and Lady Prime Minister. And say, Mrs., now I bought a fridge, so you have to give me a home to put my fridge. It doesn't make any sense. Buy a fridge, give me a home. Buy a car, give me 10 spaces, because it's not one. It's one from my house, one from the grocery stores. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, here, for example, we need to get the cars out. Maybe they're going to be able to park only on one side. And maybe even for 50 meters on one side, then the next 50 on the other, and so on, so that even the cars that are moving are going to go slower. But this is not civilized. That the most vulnerable people, the children, the babies, the older adults, the handicapped. And it's not because you don't know how to do it. You know how to do it. You do beautiful sidewalks. You do beautiful crosswalks. In many places, we see it all over the place. I saw this coffee, and I said, oh, wow, they got magnificent cofinero. And you take a look at this, and you say, oh, how nice to go there and work for a while, do the work for the university, until you open up your eyes a little bit wider, and this is what you see. Imagine, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not civilized. 6, It's only 8. I'm almost finished, sorry. Sustainable mobility. Walking, cycling, and transit gotta be best friends. Of course, we gotta improve walking, cycling, and transit. I'm not saying that this is the end of the car industry, but the way we use cars is changing very, very rapidly. I told you how in many countries now the young people don't have cars or don't even have driver's license. In many places, the older adults, the people that are aging, are terrified of the day they lose their driver's license. Not because they love cars, it's because they love mobility. A doctor in Canada did a study that said that losing a driver's license has the same psychological effect as being diagnosed with cancer. It doesn't make a lot of sense. That love is the love of mobility. People want to age in place. They want to visit the same friends. They want to shop at the same store. So investing in public transit is critical, as well as walking, as well as cycling. And people say, oh, no worries, we're going to have driverless cars. Well, if we don't change our behavior, this is what cities look like without driverless cars, and this is what cities look like with driverless cars. It's a great drawing by Copenhagenites. Walking and cycling is not a frivolity. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of most people. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of all children and youth. If you're under 18, even in the wealthiest neighborhood of Poland, if you're under 18, your only individual mode of mobility is to walk or bike. So walking and cycling safely should be a right, the right to safe and enjoyable mobility. Unless you think that only the people that have the money and the age and the desire to have a car have a right to individual mobility. That's why we're talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability, because everything is linked to everything. We also got to improve riding bicycles. If we want to improve bikeability, it's not about painting things on the shadows on the street or putting up signs or doing bicycle parking. All of this makes it nicer for the 2% or the 3 or the 4 that are already cycling, maps and racks and so on. But cars do not respect the painted lines, not even the bike sharing. That is almost like getting the saddle before the horse. The only two things that really improve is, one, lowering the speed in the neighborhoods, because when the speed is 30 or less, you can mix cars and bicycles. And 2, create a network of protected bikeways. I've seen here in Warsaw some very nice protected bikeways, but I've seen some not very nice. Also, the linkages. All of a sudden, you are biking, like even right in front of this plaza, you are biking and beautiful, and then it disappears for 10 blocks, and then it appears again. And it's nice if you are comfortable cycling, but if you are a novice, and then it's not that nice. And we gotta have 4A bicycle facilities, 4A. All ages, all abilities. All ages, all abilities. We gotta create a network that connects origins and destinations. This is Copenhagen. Lower speed in the neighborhoods, agreed. This is Seville, Argentina, Buenos Aires. It's cheap. They built 133 in 3 years. This is Seville and how they improved. No one was biking. As soon as they did the network, it clicked. It is like a citywide power network, citywide water network. We need a citywide bike network. I know there are so many good things that you are moving in the right direction. 10 years ago, you had less than 1%. Today, you got about 4%. Look at this city that helps for the people of cities of 20,000, about 100,000. This is a medium-sized city, under 200,000, about 180,000. They did a transportation plan of the whole city, including walking, cycling, car use, public transit, everybody, thinking of the winter, thinking of the summer, thinking of people going to work, people going to school. Everywhere where you have 5,000 cars or more, physical separation at one level for the cars, 5 centimeters higher for bikes, 5 centimeters higher for pedestrians, always separating. The counters, when I took this photo, 7,803 cyclists had gone by. So at midnight, it goes to 0, putting air pumps all over the place, nice signage and lockers and rest toilets. A city of 180,000, they got a lot of these parking lots, underground parking lots. So you leave your bikes there. The pedestrian street, either you leave your bike out or you walk your bike, because the pedestrians have absolutely priority. And remember that I was saying that in some places they put 30K in front of the schools. Well, here in front of the schools is not 30K, it's 0K. No cars in front of the schools. Between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m., Only the people that live there. No one else can go in. And then they also put these ping pong tables and other things so that the children are eager to come early and make friends. So it's about making a city that is nice for everybody, children and older adults and everyone. We gotta keep in mind that the quality of infrastructure is a symbol of the respect for people. And if we're going to improve public transit, one of my brothers is mayor of Bogota, and he said that the civilized city is not the one where the poor have cars, it's the one where the rich use public transit. We got to have quality public transit for everybody so that we can combine. I was working with the mayor of Quebec, and this is one of the things that they are doing. They are doing a bus rapid transit. In China, I was working with 30 mayors of China 2 or 3 months ago at Yale University. Look, this is what happens with the cities. When the cities do well economically, like most cities in Poland are doing well, you get better entertainment, better health, better education. One thing that doesn't improve is mobility if you are based on the private car. Look at the cities in China are going crazy. But then the mayor Wang Zhu was there, and the mayor Wang Zhu told me, Gil, we had all of these cars, so we built a bus rapid transit. And the bus rapid transit in Guangzhou moves more people than all of the subway lines in China, except line number 2 in Shanghai. This issue of buses, people have an issue with the buses. I remember the mayor of Malmo telling me, Gil, since people have an issue with buses, what we did on the buses is we put a nose, we cover the wheels, and now they look like trains. But are cheaper and faster and more convenient. And if you made a mistake in the past, change it. In Argentina, they had these 16 lanes for cars. The previous mayor said, I'm going to take the 6 lanes in the middle, and he created a bus rapid transit. People loved it, and he was elected president of Argentina last year. This is when my brother was mayor last time, and this is what the Japanese corporation, quote unquote, were saying. Elevated highways, $10 billion. Fortunately, he said no. Look at the issue. None of the cars would even park in the parking lot. All of them were on the sidewalks. Huge fight just to get the cars out of the sidewalks. The retail got organized to try to impeach the mayor. Hired hundreds of people getting signatures. Fortunately, they couldn't get enough. Here in Warsaw, I've seen a lot of good uses of public transit. And it's nice that it's beautifying, and the flowers and the plants and the different options. But it has to be nice everywhere. I mean, I want to give you as an example. The other day, a mayor said, Gil, you know, we are going to, and this would be great for example, as some of those points of the 10 city centers, is he said, Gil, everybody's going to get out of their cars because we do these big buses that are tall and wide. I said, you think anybody's going to get out of their car when this is what the bus stop looks like? This is a school with 1,500 students, and this is the bus stop for 1,500 students. So then I decided to show that mayor another bus stop. And he said, Gil, why are you showing me this bus stop? I said, because this is what the bus stop would look like if the decision makers use the bus service. We need the decision makers to use public transit. 7, the community is the expert. The community, we need to go and listen to the community. Honestly listen. We need to engage. It's not just tokenism. It's not so that when we go to the media or we go to the city council, did you go to the community? Yes, check. No. We honestly have to go and listen because the community have so many great ideas. If I ask one of my daughters that is a yoga instructor, what are we going to do in this park? She's going to say, oh, Dad, let's do yoga. And in that park, let's do more yoga. And that, I said, daughter, not everybody wants to do yoga in the park. Some people want to do a fire pit. Others want to have a pizza oven. Others want to paint. This is a magnificent success, the pizza ovens, especially for the young people. Some people want to paint. Some people want to do all kinds of activities, take photos, go skateboarding. Let's ask the citizens. They come with so many ideas. Sometimes we do workshops and we are citizens. Give us some impatience and give us some orchids. Think of some impatience and orchids that you can do. What are the impatience? Low cost, low risk, high visibility. Because that gives you credibility to do more ambitious things. The other day, I was at a workshop and a woman said, Gil, when I'm walking home, the sidewalk is very dark. And I said, yeah, but putting light on the sidewalk is not an impatient. It's not low cost. And she said, no, it's very low cost because when I'm walking, the sidewalk is very dark, but the street is very well lit. the street don't need so much light because the cars already have lights. All I'm asking is for someone to go up on the ladder, take this light, turn it 90 degrees, share it with the sidewalk. She said it's the same post, the same light, the same cable, and she's totally right. Actually, I've seen a lot of the streets in Warsaw, and most of the streets are very well lit, and most of the sidewalks are very dark. These are the kind of things. So there are so many impatience that we could do, and then orchestrating that we can do years 2 to 5. And 8, work on the benefits. Work on the benefits. Because some people are polarized. They don't want the pedestrians. Like this guy in the TV, I hate pedestrians, or I hate cycling, or I hate parks. Don't tell them, it's not about the parks, it's not about the cyclists, it's about the benefits. It's about the environment, it's about economic activity, it's about recreation, it's about transportation, it's about health. So each time that you are promoting an idea, have like 5 cards with 5 different benefits. Let me give you an example for the public health. Is this what the future looks like? You know, the issue of obesity is not how people look. The issue is that obesity has to do with heart attacks and respiratory problems and anxiety and depression and so on. And in Portland, more than 1 in 5, almost 1 in 4 is obese already. We got to work on both sides of the balance, calories in and calories out. We got to improve the school lunches. We got to have farmers markets all over the city. We got to have also gardens in the schools, in the parks, and so on. As well as improving the calories in, we got to improve burning calories. We got to be active. Just a little bit active can improve almost everything. Children, 60 minutes a day. Adults, 30 minutes a day. They say the physical activity is the wonder drug. No better place to do physical activity than in the public place, in the sidewalk, in the street, in the park. But let's keep in mind that sustainable mobility and parks improve physical health. But there is no health without mental health. We got to work on the mental health as well. Depression, today is the world leading cause of disability. If we have a contact with nature, it's going to improve the mood, the cognitive attention. So when you see small parks and trees and so on, this is much more than just because it's beautiful. When we have neighborhoods with more green space, it lowers depression and anxiety and the levels of stress. So we got to work on all of those details. It's really, really important. Mental health. Shirin-yoku in Japan, what is it? It's forest bathing. Now it's very clear. If you go into forest bathing just 2 days, you're going to increase your anti-cancer cells by 50%. So parks is not only good for people of all ages and all generations. So I want to end by inviting you in Warsaw. There are some challenges, but more than challenges, you got these wonderful opportunities. But if we define our city around cars, what do we get? More cars. And then we have to invite our friends to help us cross the street. And this isn't far from reality. The streets are getting wider, the cars are going faster. We're living longer, so we're getting older. And then what do? We build more roads. As if that was going to be a solution to anything. And it's not only these big, gigantic roads. Look, a city very similar to Warsaw. That is Milano. Look what Milano has done. Milano is doing the same craziness, allowing cars to go into the sidewalk. The sidewalks are becoming side parking. It's totally crazy. They used to have these beautiful promenades, and now they're being encroached by cars. So don't follow those bad examples. And of course, these are others that... building more roads to solve mobility is as if we were trying to put out a fire using gasoline. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. But if we define our city around people, we're going to get healthier and happier people. And that is the idea. In Warsaw and every city in Poland. How are we going to get healthier and happier people and better quality of life? So let's think outside the box. These are not technical issues. These are not financial issues. It's political with a big P. So we need to think political in a big sense. Everybody has to participate. Build broad alliances. Who in the alliance? Get the elected officials at all levels. Work with the elected officials. It doesn't matter which party. 2, the public sector staff, but not only the planners and the transportation. Get public health, get environment, get economic development, get tourism, get everybody. And 3, the community. It's like a 3-legged stool. One of the legs is elected officials, one leg is public sector staff, the other is the community, the activists, the media, the universities, the business community. And all three together are going to move. An example that is not technical. We love working with children. Here we are the children. Why don't you do a drawing of how would you like your community when you have your parents' age and you have children of your own age? And people say, Gil, great that you work with the children because the children are the future. No, work with the children is not about the future. It's about the present. If we educate the children very, very well, they go home and then they educate their parents. And that's what we need to do. Look, Anna, she did almost everything, green and trees and so on. Edgar, he's only 13, but he wrote here, I want fewer cars, and many people walking, many people cycling. And then he didn't write, but he drew an area for pedestrians, for cyclists, for buses, and for cars. He's only 13. He doesn't know that we walk at 5 kilometers an hour. But he knows that if we mix pedestrians and cyclists, the pedestrian is injured. If we mix cyclists and cars, the cyclist is injured. And then he drew public parks with low buildings and street-level activity. A couple of months after this, I was doing a workshop with the PhD students in the National University in South Korea. And I told those students, I hope you study very, very hard. Because now the 13-year-old children can summarize Urban Planning 101 in one drawing. So many years ago, we were not even talking about these issues. Now we're talking, and it's good. Now we're talking. But talking is not enough. We got to move from talking to doing. So I invite you to think that it is not about sustainable mobility or parks. It's about creating a vibrant Warsaw. It's about creating healthy communities where all people are going to live happier. I wish you much success. Thank you very much. Any questions? Oh, yes. Thank you. We have time for a few questions or comments. If you don't want a question, you want a comment. By the way, these are our websites. We're an NGO, 80 cities and World Urban Parks, and everything you'll find videos and documents and photos and everything is for free. So we got about 10 minutes for questions or comments. Anybody has a question or a comment? And here is a
Widzę
microphone.
tam jeszcze ktoś ma ochotę, bo chciałbym zaplanować ruch mikrofonu. Tutaj jest jeszcze jedno...
It can be in Polish or in English because here I got the
Dobrze, czy
mic.
jeszcze jedno mamy czas na jeszcze jedno? Ktoś chciałby? Dobrze, możemy podać mikrofon, inaczej będę musiał rzucić po prostu.
Ja teraz czytam to sobie, proszę. So I have one question which is not to your lecture but to your work in Bogota some years ago. With this question which I have from seeing the film Bogota Change, that there was one of the histories was that you moved out the slums from the city center to create the public space there, and in film it was not told where the people have moved and how it was organized. It was only that they protested and they have to move. Could you say 2 sentences about that question?
Well, the thing is, there was an era of slums, that it wasn't just slums. It was the biggest drug distribution of the country within 5 blocks from City Hall, 6 blocks from the head of the presidency of the country. And they were exploiting. There was child prostitution, and there was drugs, and there was all kinds of things. And the easy thing is not to do anything. But then, that was when my brother was mayor, then they went in and they took out and they actually created a lot of places where they would take the children. Actually, something not only happened 15 years ago, happened 2 months ago in another place, similar place. And as I said, the easy thing is not to do anything. That's why the last 3 administrations for 12 years, they just saw this. They found people that were kidnapped at that time when they went and took over that area. They found hundreds, not 1 or 2, hundreds of child and youth prostitution, children that were being forced. So, of course, you need to recuperate those areas, but of course have the places to take care of them. Also, you need to work with the legal system. All of a sudden, the courts, some lawyer went to the courts and got a permit saying that the street people have the right to live in the street. So you cannot force the people to go into an area to be recuperated because they're completely in drugs. So now there is a new law that is moving through to see if that can be changed. Because, of course, you not only have to respect the rights of the people on the street, but also the rights of people living. And some people have been so abused that they lose any possibility of actually being taking care of themselves. But of course, that has to be top priority. Doing nothing is really forcing those people to eventually die or have a horrible quality of life forever. It's not just to beautify the public space. Actually, when we improve the public space, the people that benefit the most are the low-income people. The low-income people. The wealthy people, especially in developing countries, they go for weeks, for months, without even stepping on public place. They live in a private condominium tower. They get on a private car. They go to another building to work. Then they go shopping in a private shopping center. On weekends, they go to play in private country clubs. They never stop in the public place. So having wonderful sidewalks where people can access public transit, where people can actually walk to places, is not for the wealthy. Those rich people, as I mentioned, they can go for weeks or months without stepping on the public place. The people that suffer the most are the ones that actually have to be in the public place. And instead of just having to be, it's an invitation to use it in a proper form. Yes?
I just wanted to talk about my experience. I lived in Copenhagen for over a year. When I moved there, I was actually a bit scared when I saw all those bikes going everywhere. I was scared to join them and to start biking because I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna be hit by a bike and I will die for sure. But I started to bike and I loved it. I just fell in love with biking in Copenhagen. And it's a really great city for biking, for walking as well. But when you live in such a city with this infrastructure for bikes, you just think, oh my God, they have everything and it's just perfect. But they don't stop developing this. They start building bridges for bikes, which is like incredible. Who would thought about building bridge for bikes, not for cars? So it was great. But then I moved to Warsaw, and I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna definitely die when I'm gonna start biking here. I will be hit by a car, and that will be the end of my life. But I started biking in Warsaw, and it was lovely as well. I mean, I was surprised how many bike lanes we have in Warsaw, and the infrastructure is quite good comparing to what I thought it will be. As I know quite a lot of other cities in Poland as well, and I know how it looks like. But I see also how the infrastructure develops here. I lived in Warsaw just over a year, and quite a lot has changed since then. But I'm just wondering, sometimes when I see the bike lanes, if someone actually thought how to build them, because they are not really separated from the cars or from the pedestrians, and sometimes I just have the thought that everyone is mixing, like I'm trying to go by bike, but then pedestrians are invading my space, kind of, and it's not safe for anyone. But as well, cars are doing the same, and bikes are not very well separating from cars and so on. So I'm really happy how Warsaw looks like, but I really hope it will be much better.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I think that it is dangerous to bike in Warsaw. It's not as bad as it was 5 years ago, but still it's not as good as it could be. And I bike everywhere. Toronto is much worse. Warsaw is much better than Toronto for cycling. And I bike in Toronto all year, even in the middle of the winter at -30 or whatever. But that doesn't mean that it's safe. The fact that a few people like me are a little bit crazy and we go and bike. We should not have to put our life at risk every day when we are biking. Something that is very important is cyclists and pedestrians must be best friends. Must be best friends. And sometimes when you mix cyclists and pedestrians, the pedestrian becomes very vulnerable. Because from the point of view of vulnerability, the most vulnerable is the pedestrian. Then the bicycle don't make any noise. So all of a sudden you are walking and a bicycle appears and you get scared. And if you are 30 and athletic, it's okay. But if it's someone like my mom is 84 and she's walking and a bike appears, she's not gonna walk outside anymore. And then she's gonna stay home and get depressed and die. So it's very important to make sure that the cyclists also, that the pedestrian has to be the #1 priority because everybody's pedestrian. Second, that the cyclists then don't interfere with the pedestrians, but also that the car will not interfere with the cyclists, so we need to create. One of the things that I love about Copenhagen is that it's not rocket science. Everything that they have done in Copenhagen, you can do it in a short time. Every year, in 3 weeks, I'm taking 30 leaders from the US, city leaders. Every year for the last 10 years, I've been taking leaders from the US. And when they get there, I said, what I want you to look is that it's not rocket science. It's totally doable. It's totally doable. It just takes political will. It's not a technical issue. It's a political one.
Okej. Na sekundkę. Okay, one short question. I believe that the problem in Warsaw here is urban sprawl, that more and more people tend to live in the neighborhoods which are more farther from the center than like 10 or 15 kilometers. Do you have any way that you think there is to solve it?
Well, yes, it's very important. That's very important. When you talk about mobility, you need to talk also about land use at the same time. Land use and mobility are like two sides of the same coin. So you got to work on that. You need to densify the downtowns. Also, you need to have fantastic parks. One of the reasons why people move out is also because they want more green areas. But if we could have fantastic parks, small, medium, large, active, passive, contemplative in the downtown, less people will be moving out. Also, they need to realize that using the car has to have the true cost. So when they come in, if you want to park in downtown Toronto or New York or Los Angeles, it's going to cost you $30 a day. So it cannot be that it's free or that it's for $5. So you need to charge what, because that space belongs to all of us. It should not be free. So also you need to put a limit. The cities in Poland cannot continue growing indefinitely. Let me give you an example. In Mexico, we're working with Mexico. In Mexico, in the last 30 years, all the large cities with more than 50,000 people grew by 2 times the population. But imagine a city that grows twice the population. That is not good or bad in itself. But the population grew twice, the footprint grew 11 times. How can you bring water and sewage and jobs and hospitals and education to cities that are growing 11 times the footprint? So somehow you got to put limits. The greater Toronto area is growing very fast. Toronto is going to grow by 50% in the next 20 years. And the provincial government put a green belt. No one can build beyond that green belt. So, and actually created incentives to increase the densities. If the cities continue to grow, we are in many ways mortgaging the future of millions of people for the next centuries.
Gila, I would like to ask you one question regarding the timing. As you already noticed during your stay in Warsaw, we have already started to think about our public spaces and the change of it. How to boost this process? Because I think so that all of the people gathered today think that this is exactly the way that we should do and the changes that we have to provide also in Warsaw. But you have noticed a lot of processes from Bogota to a lot of towns all over the world, and you see that partially they are done by education and all the things that you mentioned on the end of your lecture, but there are examples that were did a lot of more faster. How to do it faster?
Well, I think you got to move faster. I totally agree. How? In many ways. One, for example, I think you need the 5 steps that I mentioned. One is developing the sense of urgency. Now, so each city has a sense of urgency for different reasons. New York, when Bloomberg was going to start working in New York, he created the plan NYC 2030. And he said, New York is going to grow by 1 million people. If we don't do something, we're going to collapse. Other cities might create a sense of urgency around public health. Others around the environment, but create a sense of urgency. 2, then generate the political will, where the general intent must prevail. 3, you got to have doers. Find out in the public sector who are doers. 4, have leaders all over the place. And 5, engage the citizens. Very important that the citizens, you can no longer be spectator. Write emails to the newspapers. And don't send a letter to the newspaper with 1 name. Put 10 names and then it will get published. Write emails to the elected officials. Go to the public meetings. I mean, I'm very humbled that all of you are here and all of you had many options. You could have been reading a book, going to a coffee shop, watching TV, chatting with friends or family. The fact that all of us are here is to see together as a group, how can we get more things done? How can we how can we learn to live? As I mentioned, we learn to survive. Now we need to learn how to live. And we got to move things faster. Also, it's nice that some cities are doing interesting things. Paris, for example, when they brought the public bikes, the Velib, when Velib came on board, they brought 20,000 bikes in 1 year, 20,400. They set up 1,541 stations. But the important thing is to put those stations, they put the stations instead of car parking. They eliminated 5,000 car parking. Some of you think if we eliminate 1 car parking in Warsaw, it's like a sin. You have to go to church because it's a sin to take away a car parking. Car parking is not a constitutional right. There's hundreds of rights in the Constitution. Not one of them is a car parking. However, look, in Paris they eliminated 5,000 in 1 year just to put the stations, plus many thousands more to put the bikeways. So let's look at also what some other cities, lowering the speed. Many cities, more than 13 million in the UK now live in 30k an hour communities. Not one street. Before it used to be 30k zones, like in front of the school. It doesn't work. Because then you are driving and you go into a residential, you say, is this 30, is this 40, is this 35? No, all at 30. It's easier to obey and also easier to enforce. If you are on an arterial, it might be 40, 50, 60. As soon as you go into a residential, it's 30, everywhere. So the UK, more than 13 million people. Toronto, as of last year, almost 1 million people living in 30K. New York, the default speed now in New York is 25 miles. So it's a very clear trend that people are moving. But that is very important. We really gotta move faster, and we don't have the 40 years to do a great bicycle infrastructure as Copenhagen did. We gotta do it in 2 or 3 or 4. I was in Bogota last week. The government right now are building 250 kilometers of protected bikeways in the next 3 years. So you gotta move, and it's a much poorer city than Warsaw. It's a much poorer country than Poland. So we see countries that are very rich, very poor, developed, not developed. So these are not technical or financial issues. They are political, and we really gotta move forward. There is one message. There is not gonna be a Martian coming down to fix our city. It's up to all of us. That's why at the end I mentioned the idea of broad alliances. We need to create alliances between the elected officials, the public sector staff, as well as the citizens, the universities, and the activists. And here, Arthur is going to tell you about the magazine, about the magazines. All of this is critical to have activists. You play a very, very important role, but the media also plays a very important role. Even if the guy on Sunday criticized, but the woman was totally in favor, but all of that is important. It's very, very important. But keep in mind, last comment, keep in mind that it's not about walking or cycling or transit or parks. Those are the means. It's about having a vibrant city, a successful city. with healthy communities where all people are going to live happier. That is really the big goal.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, what can we do about the car industry? The car industry has great budgets, and it has great budgets for commercials and for lobbying, and they actually control the public opinions. What can we do about that? Thank you.
Oh, the car industry obviously is very powerful and is very dangerous because they make governments do stupid decisions. You go to Brazil, and at the same time that the government is promoting sustainable mobility, the government is subsidizing people to buy more cars, subsidizing the low interest rates and long time. I mean, the car, imagine, the other day I was working in Tirana, the capital of Albania. Tirana, when it was communist 25 years ago, had 7,000 cars, 7,000. Today, it has 400,000, 400 for 1 million people. Tirana is as flat as this table. It's a beautiful city, 10 by 6 kilometers, 10 by 6. However, everybody uses car. It's crazy. More than half of the trips in Tirana, according to the mayor, are less than 1 kilometer. Less than one. I was going to go to a building 2 blocks away, and they say, oh no, Mr. Peñalosa, you got away. And they start calling the chauffeur. No, 1 minute. And then you got into the car, and it took you half an hour to move 2 blocks. I said, it would have been 5 minutes walking. The current mayor is a huge leader. He only walks, he only bikes. He's trying to change habits. So also we need to be smarter the way we do things. For example, I see in many public transit buses and trains, we allow advertising in our cars. No, that is the competition. You don't see in the Coca-Cola fridge advertisement of Pepsi-Cola. You should not see in the public transit advertising of cars. We need also to take advantage we need to communicate better the benefits. We need to tell the young people, look what they're doing. The same way that people are playing Pokemon everywhere. In the last 3 weeks I was working, in the last 4 weeks I worked in Kuala Lumpur, in Hong Kong, in Tokyo, in Santiago, and in Bogota. 5 very different cities. When I went to the public places, in the streets, in the sidewalks, in the parks, everybody was playing Pokemon. Well, there's something that are a little bit universal. By the way, I think it's great that they play Pokemon in the parks. In Kuala Lumpur, my friends, the environmentalists, were very upset. They said, oh, they don't even look at the trees. They're just focused. I said, look, at least they're playing in the park. Otherwise, they would be playing at home. But what I'm saying is that we need to do a little bit better job at marketing. This is not just an issue of mobility. The same way, let's wonder why is it that the young people in the US or Canada are buying fewer cars? Why is it that they're getting fewer driver's licenses? So maybe the young people in Poland, maybe they can lead a revolution and say, no, it's more important, and start working on some of these issues about human being, about cities for people. So yeah, the car industry is not going to disappear. It exists, but we also need to promote. Many more bicycles are sold every year than cars. There are many more bicycles in the world than cars. Here in Warsaw, 30% of the commute is done in car. 70% is done walking, cycling, or in public transit. However, when you look at the space of the street, it's 80%, or at least 70% is for the cars, 30% for the rest. When the use is the other way around. So we'll need to start looking at those numbers and saying, look, that isn't right. The health, the cost of the population living longer is going to be huge if the older adults are not healthy. The only really big thing to be healthier is to be able to walk. If you take public transit, you only got to do 30 minutes a day. They used to say, no pain, no gain, do a marathon. Now, 30 minutes. You walk to public transit, 10 minutes. You take public transit, then 10 minutes from transit to work. You do the same in the afternoon, you did 40 minutes. You already did your 30 minutes a day. So we need also to change the discussion. It's not just about the car or the public transit or the bicycle. No, it's about the environment. It's climate change. It's the quality of air that we're breathing. It's about the level of the noise. Try an open street, the ciclovia or open streets. Try it next year. Try to do it in the spring. Imagine how wonderful. All of a sudden, you got a main street that is quiet. We can speak at this level and we can hear. Now we go and we got to scream because otherwise we don't hear each other. So we need to have the right of silence also. We need to have the right to clean air. We need to have the right to public health. So I think that part of it is changing the conversation. It's not just about mobility, but it's about all of those other benefits that we want and are important.
Okay, thank you, Jill, not only for sharing the knowledge and experiences, but the energy, and hopefully everyone get effect on that. Dziękuję Państwu bardzo. To już będzie koniec dzisiejszego wykładu, ale mam nadzieję, że nie koniec całego procesu zmiany. Pamiętajcie proszę, że wspierali nas w tym naszym dzisiejszym doświadczeniu i całej wizycie Guillermo Peñalosy zarówno miasto stołeczne Warszawa, jak i Aquarius Management, Napollo, Bar Studio, Marzyciele Rzemieślnicy, Plac Defilat, Skańska i Warexpo. Państwo również mogą nas wesprzeć, nie tylko kupując magazyn miasta, ale przede wszystkim czytając go i dyskutując z nami. Dziękuję bardzo, dobranoc.